I'm sitting in for Brian Wagner on the Vision Alignment live stream. If you were here yesterday, and almost nobody was, thank God, you got to see. But fortunately, thanks to my buddy Wes Wyatt, he posted on Facebook that this all went up on three different platforms, on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And another one, I think, what we did yesterday, which was for 4 full minutes, I sat here in front of this camera thinking I understood how it all worked, and had some kind of a internet issue, I thought. And so for 4 minutes, all I did was stare at the screen and and mutter. I did a lot of muttering. Yeah. So what you probably saw, if you saw the recording of that and probably bailed on it after a few minutes, was 4 minutes of, depending on your sense of humor, either the dullest or the most entertaining 4 minutes in live stream history. Because mostly it was like watching, trying to teach Pop how to use FaceTime. Honestly, it was just me looking. You know, something happens at some point past 50 years old. We have to start wearing glasses to read anything. And of course, when you put on the glasses, you can't see what's out there. So you wear them halfway down your nose, right? And then you look at things that you need to see at that angle. But at some point, I've noticed that you start adopting that angle for anything that confuses you, whether or not you have bifocals on. So yesterday I had 4 minutes of me going, let's see, leaning over, there's the router light. And it was tough to take. But I mean, at some point I just thought would have been appropriate to go like, Ma, get one of the grandkids on the phone. I'm trying to get on the internet. But it was painful. But I think I got everything worked out today. Hopefully we're out there live. And if you're joining us, want you to share, please comment. We will display your comments. It's just me, my dog, and my cat. So, you know, that's my whole tech crew. But sitting here in this room and sharing with you just a couple of ideas, I thought it would be appropriate that today what we need to talk about are some coping skills for when things do go wrong. I mean, what do you do when things do go wrong, you know? And so one of the greatest tools that we have at our disposal is a sense of humor. Because if you got a sense of humor, I had an old mentor of mine used to tell me, the shameless are never embarrassed. And I don't know if that's true, but I will say that people with a sense of humor, they don't let it bother them nearly as long because they've got a way to filter it through laughter. So we're going to talk about that today. So let's just get ready to go. Please make sure that you join in the conversation. I'd love to hear from you. If you're watching this later, please like it, share it, give Brian a boost in his viewership, and we'll be right back with you. Okay, well, you know what? Today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about laughter, you know, because I think humor really does make a difference. It makes a difference not only in those moments like yesterday when things go wrong, but it makes a difference in just being able to keep our level of joy up and allowing us to choose amusement over anger. And I think that's and it's not like it happens in a second. I mean, it's completely legitimate to be angry when you run into a traffic jam, you know, when you drop your computer and the screen cracks, you know, those things are absolutely reasonable. But if we have a sense of humor, we have a way to cope for when things go wrong, and it gives us some handle control over what maybe is not something we can control in any other way. I was at a program one time. I was invited to speak for a hospital here in Columbus, Ohio. It was a weekend retreat that they were having for cancer survivors and their families, and the theme was their We Can Weekend. This was when I was first starting out speaking, so this was a very different group than I had spoken for up to that point, because I talked to people who were dealing with they were dealing with changes in technology and maybe some reorganizations and all. And so they had legitimate stresses, but they were all not really life and death stresses. This group really was dealing with some life and death issues, because they weren't just the people who administered care to cancer survivors. They were the cancer survivors and their families. So the event took place at a big state park lodge, and I watched people come in the room. I was nervous because I thought, what are they really going to get from me? Because I haven't walked in their shoes. I'm not a doctor. I can't come to them with that authority. But the people who are putting on the event, they said, we think humor is an important coping tool. We'd like you to come and share some ways that maybe they can do that and enjoy some laughter too. And I thought, I think it's important, but I don't know how well it's going to be received. But I remember walking into the front of that room and looking at a big, long room, and I watched people come in the back, and there was a woman who, as soon as she came through the door, got my attention, right? Because she was just an attractive human being, right? And I don't mean in looks in some glamorous movie star way. I mean, there was just something about her that was magnetic, and it drew others to want to be near her. And you saw she had a little group of disciples that came in with her when she walked through the door. And there were people laughing around her. She just had this energy of joyfulness that other people were clearly benefiting from. And what was also clear was she was a cancer survivor, and not just a survivor. She was going through that treatment right then. Some of these folks had been out of treatment for months or years. She was going through it right then. And you could tell because she had her head wrapped in a scarf to hide the effects of the therapy that she was undergoing. She had a T-shirt on that had something printed on it I couldn't see from where I was right up at the front of the room. She came right down front to sit. When she got close enough, I remember I finally could read that T-shirt. It said "Hair by Chemo," and I laughed at that. That surprised me because most people don't make chemo jokes, And I went, ha, and then I went, oh, because I thought, wow, how can she laugh at cancer? I'm sure that I wasn't the only one who thought that. There in that state park lodge where people were there for vacations and they weren't there for the cancer survivor event. I bet a few of them were a little uncomfortable with her use of humor. But I understood later, and I understood that what she did was she took something that was not in her control, and she found the part of it that wasn't life and death. The loss of her hair wasn't a life and death issue. It was just something that was a temporary side effect of the treatments that she was undergoing to save her life and restore her health. And so she allowed herself to use humor as her handle of control in that situation. And because of that, she had some measure of control and coping ability to be able to do that, to navigate that moment in her life successfully. And so I thought that was an amazing and very brave thing that she did, that she was able to laugh. And there was good news about that, because 11 months later, I was invited to come back and speak just with the nursing staff of that same group. And I shared what I had seen at their weekend retreat. And one of the nurses approached me afterwards, and she said, I know who you're describing. Her name's Barbara. She has just been one of our favorite patients. She is just one of the most joyful, positive people I've ever known. And she's doing great. She's been in remission now for months, and we have great hopes for her to get her full health back. So then 5 years later, I met her. I was at a tree lighting ceremony for that same hospital. And they said, just make a few remarks and flip the lights on in the tree. Each light will represent a patient of ours that we currently have, or the memory of one that we had the privilege of caring for. And so I said, okay. I shared the story of Barbara. And after it was all over, everybody ran back inside. It was a cold night. Went back to get their refreshments and hot chocolate. And a woman approached me and she said, loved hearing that story. And I said, well, you know what? It's helped me get my perspective. And I know, sure, it's helped a lot of other people that I've shared it with. She said, well, I like it so much because I am Barbara. And she didn't mean it in a metaphorical sense. She was really Barbara. And I looked at her and she looked like the picture of health. I said, you look wonderful. She said, well, I've been in remission now going on 5 years. And she said, but you know what? Every day I have to make a choice. She said, some days that choice is really hard to make. Some days I don't make the right choice. It all overwhelms me. But most of the time I do. I count my blessings. I find my humor. I find my smile. I put it on. And I'm able to find laughter and joy. And she said, you know, I know the reality that anything could change at any time. But I've learned to be grateful and I've learned to be joyful. I've learned to use laughter. And I think that's why I'm still here. So I'd love to tell you, hey, sense of humor could save your life and restore your health from a serious illness. Can't promise that. But what I can tell you is it certainly makes a difference in the moment. And in the moment where sometimes things go wrong, it's really important because it helps, it helps disrupt stress. It's great function because stress is a cycle. When you have stress, it's something that it just keeps spinning up. It becomes a physiological thing. We respond to it. We get anxiety. We get a physical response to that. There's a rush of different hormonal response to the stress, which just makes that stress response even more intense. And it's almost like a spiral. But humor, laughter can disrupt it, right? It can also help you kind of get back to center after something has been, maybe it didn't go the way you wanted it to. Yesterday, I'd like to tell you, it's the first time I've ever been embarrassed in kind of public setting, but I've been embarrassed for a lot more people at a time than that. I used to do stand-up comedy, and I remember when I first started out, I had won a couple of amateur open mic contests, and so my reward for that was to get to open for a week for pay and to take that step as a professional comedy performer. And so at the comedy club where I had that experience, they said, you'll come here and you'll open for a week. So they had a radio DJ from in town to start the show, and then he would bring me up as your host and MC for tonight, Dave Caperton, and then I was to do 5 minutes at the beginning, introduce the middle act, and then the middle act would maybe take 25, 30 minutes. And then I would come back up, make a couple of announcements, and then introduce the headliner for the evening. Then after the headliner was done, just come up, thank everyone, tip your wait staff, drive safely. Thanks for coming to the show. And, that's the job of the MC. And so I was so nervous. And I'm waiting in the back of the room. The DJ got up there and he introduced me, and I almost stumbling up on stage. My heart's pounding, right? I grabbed the microphone. And I didn't know how it would go, but I tried out my first joke, and they laughed. And I tried out another one, and they laughed at that. I got a little more confident, took the microphone off the stand. I started walking around, having some fun, and I did my whole set. And then I said, okay, got your middle act here. He's from, and I told them all about the performer coming up. And I said, okay, I'll be back in a few minutes. Enjoy the show. And I walked off. Well, that DJ was waiting for me in the back of the room. And he's beckoning to me. And he looks like he's really excited. I'm sure he's just wanting to tell me. He's like, man, you were great. Yeah. But that's not what he wanted. So I could just ask here, if anybody is with us live, I would ask you to put in the chat, what's the most embarrassing situation that a male person could be in front of a group, in front of a live audience? I'm guessing it wouldn't take too long for someone to say, pants not fully zipped. Yes, that's exactly what happened. He said, Dave, I hate to tell you this, but you could tell by his face, that wasn't so. He was delighting in telling me this. He said, did you know that the whole time you're up there, your fly was undone? And I didn't even process for a second. I was like, oh, because all of a sudden I looked, and it wasn't just like a little undone. It was, I mean, people in the back of the room had information, frankly, they were not entitled to, right? I mean, I was fully clothed, but I mean, the boxers or briefs question had been answered if anybody had been curious. So I was absolutely mortified, absolutely mortified. And I did not have a sense of humor about it. I was just thinking, I got to get out of here. I started planning on telling the club owner that I was sick and I needed to go, right? Somebody else had to close. I knew that they would never let me come back and do a show again. And I didn't care at that moment because embarrassment was all I could feel. But it was at that moment that another comic who was kind of a mentor of mine, his name was Vince. Vince walked in. Vince was a young guy, was full of energy, and he came up and, I was a young guy then too. And so he came up and he saw me and he says, hey, how'd your set go? And I said, I don't know. He goes, what do you mean you don't know? Were people laughing? I said, yeah, they laughed a lot. I just don't know at what. He goes, what do you mean? And I told him, I said, my pants were unzipped the whole time, man. And Vince, he felt for me. And he was like, oh man, that's rough. And then he thought about my problem. He put an arm around my shoulder and he gave me probably the best advice anyone could have given me at that moment. He said, well, Dave, don't fix them now. And it was such a nutty thing for him to say, but it was in that moment, I thought, that's just crazy enough to work. So when it came time for me to go back up on stage, I left those pants status quo. In fact, I had a bright green shirt on. I just pulled the shirt tail right through, went up, didn't say a word about it. I heard people in the audience going, oh my gosh, But after the show, I heard a woman talking to her friend and she said, did he mean to do that? Was that part of the act? And I thought, it could be. But what I learned was what was embarrassing for me when I met it with a sense of humor and able to laugh at myself with others, it took away all the threat. And all of a sudden, it was a great way to cope, and it disrupted the stress, and it let me get through the rest of the show. That's the nature of humor, right? Humor is just a wonderful tool. My mother-in-law, who I remember when we tried to teach her how to FaceTime, and you saw exactly what we saw yesterday, or go back and look at that archive video of me going, what is that? Because we saw that the first time that we tried to teach her how to FaceTime. We gave her an iPad, said this would be a great way for you to keep in touch with your family. So make sure, you know how to do this. You push this button and then you'll FaceTime and you'll talk to us. And it's just like a phone call, right? We made it so simple. Just like Brian did with me. He said, Dave, here's this and here's this button and this is how you start it and that's how you know. Yeah, well, nothing. Didn't take it all. So we were on our way home. She lives in Cleveland and we live in Columbus. And so we're on our way home from Cleveland. And my wife is sitting in the passenger seat and her phone rings. And what we see is a FaceTime call coming in from her mom. And it looked something like this. She had the thing set so that and she said, hi, can you see me? I'm FaceTiming. I can't hear you. Bye. That was the entire call, our one and only FaceTime call we got from her, right? But one thing I love about my mother-in-law, she's quite a character. And she's from West Virginia, right? And I have a lot of family on my side from West Virginia and Kentucky and Appalachia. My wife does too. And so we love the kind of cooking that you get from that part of the country. It's what my mother-in-law proudly calls hillbilly cooking, and she has big black iron skillets, and she can just do wizardry with these black iron skillets. She can fry in them, bake in them. We have biscuits, gravy. It's salt and cholesterol. There's nothing good for you at all. Fat. I think that the family crest ought to be 2 black iron skillets over a field of Lipitor capsules, right? So but it's such comfort food, and I love it all. So several years ago, when she was not cooking so much, and she moved into some senior independent living housing, And she said, I'm not going to do much cooking anymore. So she gave us one of those black iron skillets, and the ones that she proudly made her hillbilly breakfast. So I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to do it, man. On Saturday morning, I am making us a hillbilly breakfast. And so Saturday morning rolled around, and 6 o'clock in the morning, my eyes flew open. I jumped out of bed, ran downstairs, turned the fire on the stove, put that big black iron skillet on there, big dollop of bacon grease in. I don't want any low cholesterol, unsaturated fats. No, I got the real stuff. Put it in there, it started melting down over the fire. And I started chopping up potatoes and onions. I'm kind of humming the ballad of Jed Clampett under my breath, And I looked around, and there was a little curl of smoke coming up off the fat. I thought, wow, that's not good. That's going to burn the onions, ruin everything. I've got to cool that for a moment before I put in my potatoes and onions. And so I grabbed the skillet to move it off of the fire. And you're probably ahead of me. I got a great lesson in the heat conduction properties of iron, because the handle of that was just about as hot as the bottom of it. And I grabbed it quickly, got it all the way off the stove before it clattered back down, fat went everywhere, and a grease fire started on the stove, which flares up and smoke is everywhere. The smoke alarm went off. There's a fire. And I wasn't calm at all. I panicked. My hand's burning. And I think, what do you do? Because you can't throw water on it. It'll just spread a grease fire, right? I know I've got to get the baking soda and all. But first, I've got to stop the source of that fuel. I've got to get that off of that fire. And I yanked open the first drawer where we keep some towels and things. And I saw a red pot holder, a little square red pot holder in there. And I grabbed it, wrapped it around the handle of that skillet, moved it off the fire. And then I was able to get the baking soda out and put it out. So after I got everything put out, the smoking ruin of the fat is sitting on the stove, now harmless. And I contend to the skillet handle shaped brand in the palm of my hand. I went over and turned the cold water on, began to run it over that burn, and the whole thing started to play back to me, and it was slapstick. It was absolute slapstick. And I started to laugh. And the more I thought about it, the funnier it got. And I've got this big puffing red blister on my hand, and I'm laughing, and the smoke alarm's still going off in the kitchen, and now the whole house is filled with this blue, greasy smoke. And my wife is now standing in the doorway going, what's happening? There's hilarity and disaster everywhere. And I had to get hold of myself. I said, you missed it. It was actually pretty funny. But I looked down as I was telling her what happened, and I saw that red pot holder, and it's sitting there on the counter, and I thought, that's it. That's what humor does. It's an insulator, right? It doesn't put out the fire. It doesn't solve the problem. What it does is it gives you that buffer between a reality that's just too painful to come in direct contact with, and gives you a moment of control. And in that moment of control, you can get back to doing what you have to do to get to the next step. That's all humor does, right? So it's one of the greatest gifts that we have. Humor is just one of the greatest gifts that we have. You probably are thinking of some things that have happened in your life. Embarrassments, setbacks, humiliations that at the time were very painful. And if you don't have the humor filter, they can become long-term injuries that then become obstacles to good emotional health. Humor can help us get past that when we can laugh at ourselves. So if you're thinking, well, what if I'm not funny? Maybe I'm just not a funny person. That's okay. We can use humor even if we're not particularly well versed and skilled in humor, right? And I will tell you something, it absolutely builds trust among you and others. Now, I will tell you this, it has to be compassionate and it has to be inclusive. It can't be the kind of humor that we've seen where we attack and ridicule and tear down. Victim-based humor is not what I'm talking about. When it requires a victim, stay away from it because it's destructive. It's like any other tool when you really think about it. I've got tools that I use, and I know that every one of them used the right way can help make life better. I can build things with it. Used the wrong way really can invite destruction and injury, right? So every tool can be wielded as a sharp object or a blunt instrument, but it can also be used with precision in a way to make things better and to construct and to build connections between people, because the truth is humor connects like almost nothing else. In fact, if I ask you after all this, you probably think, so it's the most effective way to connect other people. No, it's not. It's the second most effective way. The most effective way to have folks overcome all their divisions is to have them share in some catastrophe, right? When there's some disaster, right? We see wildfires or the way people came together in certain communities because of the pandemic. We saw people come together and they put aside all their differences in order to get together and try to help an acute situation of disaster and catastrophe. But I don't want to start a flood just to build some team spirit, right? In my organization, right? So instead, I want to use the second best way. And the second best way is shared laughter. Shared laughter is a wonderful way for people to connect. When we laugh with people, we trust those people, right? It builds trust and vulnerability and openness. The best way to do it is to always make sure that we aim the sharp parts inward, right? If we're going to make fun of anything, make fun of us. If you can laugh at you, it's one of the greatest signs of good mental health and emotional stability. If you can laugh at you. If you can't laugh at you, maybe that's a problem that you need to think about to work on. What is about us should allow us, we should be able to laugh at ourselves. And when we invite others to laugh at us, with us, we build trust. We don't become less in their eyes, we become more credible. And so if you're not particularly funny, I got a little tip for you, a way to do humor for the humor impaired. Because the primary humor response, what is that? I mean, what's the first thing you do in a humor situation? Now some people would say laugh. And there are those people, they go from completely serious to, but they're creepy. Let's face it. I think most of us go through a little transition period. The first humor response is the smile, right? We begin to smile, and then the smile becomes laughter. Then the laughter gets louder, it gets less controlled. If you've ever had a state of absolute uncontrollable laughter, you're just helpless before the laughter, it's complete surrender. You are in its grip, right? You ever been in a situation like that? And you're just tears streaming, and and you can't breathe, right? And you're kind of partially intoxicated, right? Your eyes squeeze shut, tears stream down your face, and then finally you lose bladder control, right? That's now stage 1 through stage 4. But it begins with the primary humor response. So even if you're not funny, you can use a type of smile that is consistent with a humor response. And it's something called the Duchenne Smile, based on a French neurobiologist from the 19th century who defined it. But it's the kind of smile that isn't just here, right? When you see a genuine smile, there's just something that informs us that we're seeing the real thing. And then we respond in kind, in a genuine way. That's what happens around here. Moving these small muscles around the eyes are what other people see as a genuine smile, the Duchenne Smile. So practice that in the mirror, right? Or turn on FaceTime if you know how to use it. And look at yourself to create the kind of smile that creates a little network of wrinkles around the eyes, and hold that for a couple of minutes. And I'll tell you, there are two benefits. One is your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what you're doing spontaneously and what you're doing deliberately. And there will be a hormonal neurochemical response in your brain consistent with a humor experience. you'll feel more joyful. You'll feel less stressed by just doing that for 1 full minute. All right. So give that a try. And then, the other thing is it absolutely improves, not to make a pun, but your face value, because I just read an interesting experiment where they showed people pictures of the same person in the same lighting, serious and smiling. And when people who had a genuine smile on their face, they asked them to estimate their age. They estimated the ages of the people smiling, the same people, 2 years younger in the smiling pictures. Now, at my age, I need all the help I can get, right? And if you're still wearing the mask, it's okay, because if the Duchenne smile happens above here, people can still see it, recognize it, and respond to it, and your brain will too. So those are just a few tips for you today. I hope that you've enjoyed. I hope that you'll share. I hope that you'll tell Brian that I did better on day 2 than I did on day 1. And as Brian would say, keep one eye on the road, but occasionally glance around and find the funny. Thanks so much. I'm Dave Caperton.